by vehicles crossing them, which have caused bridges to collapse, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, that can happen to any bridge. Mr. Speaker, the honourable member is referring to the Durham Bridge, I believe, and that bridge, Mr. Speaker, is safe. It does require some repairs. Those repairs are being carried out. And, Mr. Speaker, that bridge is due for replacement in 2005.
The honourable member for Pictou West, and your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister suggested that we not worry about the age of our bridges. Recently, you cited bridges in Europe, like the London Bridge as an example. But I hate to break this news to the minister, but London Bridge did fall down. And so will several bridges in rural Nova Scotia if this government doesn't speed up its plans to repair and replace them. Mr. Minister, you're gambling with people's safety. So I ask you, Mr. Minister, if he won't replace the Durham Bridge until 2005, will he at least instruct his staff to repair it on an urgent basis?
Mr. Transportation and Public Works.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know how many times I have to tell the honourable member that our bridges in Nova Scotia are safe. Our bridges are inspected on a regular basis. If a bridge is judged to be unsafe, Mr. Speaker, that bridge is closed and it is repaired, or if it's beyond repair, it is closed. Mr. Speaker, there is no way that this government, the Department of Transportation, or Nova Scotians will tolerate unsafe bridges. And certainly, Mr. Speaker, as Minister of Transportation, I will not do so.
Well, member for Digby Annapolis, have about 15 seconds.
15 seconds. Give him a good 15 Give us your seconds. Best 15.
Haven't got time, Chris. I'll get you tomorrow.
Order, please. Order, please. Time allotted for question period is expired. At least the honourable member didn't invite him outside. The honourable Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations, on an introduction.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to bring to the attention of the members of the House in the East Gallery a constituent of Sackville-Cobequid and a friend of mine, Stephen Highland. And if I get the members to give him the warm welcome of the House.
We welcome our guests to the gallery today. Order, please. Order, please. There's a request to revert back to notice the motion under orders of the day, so therefore be resolved can be reread. That was, is it agreed? Agreed. No member for Cape Breton Nova.
Therefore.
Just therefore be resolved partially of the resolution.
Speaker. Therefore be resolved that during this week of National Hospice Palliative Care Week, the government consider concerns raised by the DHAs when they say they need funding for palliative care services. Thank you.
Ask for waiver.
Ask for waiver.
All in favor say aye. Counterminded nay. Motion is carried. Orders of the day, government business. We already went through that. Government business, the Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that you do now leave the chair and the House resolve the committee, the whole House, on supply.
The Honourable Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank everybody for allowing me to stand here today and speak. It's been a couple of very hectic weeks here, and I have to say that I was struggling to come up with something to talk about 15 minutes after listening to a couple of weeks of budget debate, trying to find something insightful to say. However, I think I got my spark back the other morning at Human Resource meeting when the members from the Conservative Party were questioning the Halifax Regional School Board on some of the issues that they had come forward to speak to us about, looking for help for the children and youth in this province. And so I think today, Mr. Speaker, I'll bring forward some of the issues that have come forward in my community. Mr. Speaker, my
order, please. Order, please. No member of Dartmouth East has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Right now, my constituency office has over 65 clients. These are people that come to my office looking for help because they cannot find it anywhere else. They don't want to come to my office. They'd like to get the help they need from their government. Just in the last 3 weeks, in fact, since we've been back here, my office has taken on 10 new cases, and this is probably from about 3 days ago, and we've probably got more since then. Mr. Speaker, people come to my office because their income assistance is not enough. They come to us looking for assistance because they're not finding it at community services. People, Mr. Speaker, are falling behind on their bills when they have to decide and make decisions whether or not they will buy food or keep their lights on or their heat on. People continue to call my office for help. They don't have enough money. The issues that we're seeing on a daily basis in my office are calls from people saying that they don't have enough money to survive. There's no support out there for them to help them learn how to survive or how to live cheaply when they lose their job, or if it's a single mom or a student, whatever. They're chronically juggling which bills to pay. Sometimes they cannot pay the bills. We have people coming in. Last week, in fact, 2 constituents called on the day that Nova Scotia Power had designated as their cutoff day. This week already we've had 2 calls, and their power will be cut off tomorrow, Friday. We have had people not being able to pay their home heating fuel bills over the winter, and if not for the help of community or other people, they would not have heat, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have a constituent with a teenage daughter that needs dental work. She's been rushed to the hospital on numerous occasions. She's now got eating problems, stomach problems, and is missing school because of this issue. The government is not providing the services that are needed for our children and our youth in our community. We have people coming to us. And Mr. Speaker, these are just the cases that I'm going to talk about that just came in the last couple weeks, because I can't go through 65. We've got people coming in that do not have the money to pay for eyewear. We have people coming in that cannot pay for their prescription drugs. I'm continuously hearing stories of seniors that cannot pay their car insurance, and it's a struggle. They're on fixed incomes, their home insurance is taking a hit, and that issue has continued to stay with us. Mr. Speaker, I have actually people calling my office because they're having problems with custody cases, and we know this is not somewhere where an MLA or constituency office, something that we should be dealing with. However, this is the state that we have brought people to when they have to call an MLA or constituency office when they're dealing with these issues, and they shouldn't have to. We have a crisis in our housing. We've got people that are calling in with moldy buildings. And as I said, heating problems during that cold snap. There were people with no heat at all, and there were some that luckily were provided with space heaters. Unfortunately, there are people that are afraid to complain at all about the poor conditions that they are living in because of the fear of retribution by their landlords. Sometimes people call, they won't even tell us their names. They're that afraid. They call just wanting to let us know these are the issues they're facing, and there's a sense of hopelessness. We have a lack of affordable housing. We've got an issue with unsafe neighborhoods, lack of facilities for people to access, to go and get services, lack of transportation, lack of safe playgrounds. I recently had a lady call who would like to, well, she doesn't really have any choice, give up her job to stay home and look after her mom with Alzheimer's. She was hoping that the government had something in place that would help her do that. We are trying to help this person. She's got a couple of weeks, she has had a couple of weeks off for compassionate leave, but to my knowledge, there's nothing out there to pick up where that's going to leave off. And I do believe we should be able to keep, our parents at home with us and look after them there, if at all possible. Home Care Nova Scotia continues to be an issue. There's continuous cutbacks in the amount of time that home care is given to our people that need home care. We have people with disabilities and progressive diseases who should actually be seeing their home care level rise, not fall. And the $50 fee for cancellation is a concern to these people. These people already feel that in a certain way they are trapped in their homes because they are at not the beck and the call, but they have to keep a tight schedule when they're waiting for home care to come into their home and address their needs. If they want to get out into the neighborhood like we do, they have to phone and arrange for Necessibus well in advance, close to 2 weeks in advance. And now we're telling these people that if something comes up and it's an emergency, or perhaps, somebody calls and offers you, a couple of days away or something that would be wonderful that you'd be able to take advantage of that, they can't because they're afraid they're going to be hit with the $50 fee. And as we know, many of these people are on low income already. So these people are facing a loss of independence in their own home, in their own neighborhoods. The assessment method that the government is using has been described as humiliating, degrading, and I don't think that's the way we should be treating people that need our help in this society. The assessment method does not ask the home care recipient for input, and there is an issue right now with home care. A lot of these recipients would like to go into an independent, self-managed home care program. And as we know, there's 9 people in that program, in that pilot project now, and they would like to see that extended, and they do feel that that's cost-effective, and it gives them more independence in their life. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to mention some concerns that exist in Dartmouth East. I've heard concerns from constituents, and especially recently at a public community meeting at Prince Andrew High School, there was a large turnout of neighbors from that neighborhood that were very concerned about the use of drugs, the increasing number of break-ins in their community, and I know that the police force are trying to do everything they can, but I have heard from them, and they have the issue of when they do come on their shift, their time is scheduled, they're so booked up, they have scheduled things that they have to go and take care of, and that the patrol time that used to exist doesn't exist now in HRM. Mr. Speaker, there's the issue in many of my schools in regards to the maintenance of the schools, the maintenance of the playgrounds, and in some cases, the non-existence of playgrounds throughout HRM. There's a lack of resources being put into our schools, and I'll speak about that later. There is a lack of busing. We have many people that are working at minimum wage jobs, and it's a real hassle to try and get to work right now in HRM. I actually see people now getting off the bus and hopping into a taxi because there's just no bus that's going to get them home. And the buses some of the routes stop running at a certain time, and we've got young people that are trying to put themselves through some sort of education, and they're working at jobs that end late in the evening, and they basically have no means of transportation to and from. Mr. Speaker, recently I had a town hall meeting, and I would like today to go over some of the issues that were raised at that. There was an issue revolving around businesses in Dartmouth East, and I'm sure in all of HRM, that the cost of insurance was skyrocketing out of control. One business in Dartmouth East had their insurance rise from $11,000 to $33,000 in 1 year. And this business does not have the same increase in clientele, so I don't know how we expect these businesses to stay in business and therefore take part in the things that happen in our community, and that also mentioned at that meeting was that the nonprofits were taking a massive hit in increases, and that was a concern that a lot of these organizations that work for the less fortunate and advocate for people are perhaps going to have to shut down. I continue to receive calls about, as I said, insurance rates rising, and people just phone and they just don't understand why that is happening. They thought what the government did was going to stop that from happening, and I'm in the unfortunate position of telling them, no, it did not. Okay. User fees. There was an issue with user fees not being based on income or the ability to pay. People had brought up issues of the lack of investment in our universities, in our infrastructure, and that the federal and provincial cutbacks to funding were never going to come back once they were lost. The lottery revenue was brought up, pots of money going into the government's general revenue, and no accountability or breakdown of that funding. There was some talk around the lack of a community center in Dartmouth East. Dartmouth East has a rising population. We have to travel outside of our community to get to the Sportsplex or Cole Harbour Place, and we feel that the dollars are leaving our community and we should be able to keep those in our community. But Mr. Speaker, I know I'm running out of time, and I thank you for listening to me today, and hopefully at another time I'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to join the debate today going into supply. And Mr. Speaker, I'd like to talk for a few moments about the healthcare system in this province, and more specifically, Mr. Speaker, the healthcare system as it affects a certain community in Nova Scotia, namely New Waterford, and the people who work at the New Waterford Hospital. Mr. Speaker, in our healthcare system, we greatly depend on our medical practitioners in every role they play. In fact, we often hear the Minister of Health commending the great efforts and work done by those medical practitioners when hit with health crisis in our province. It's these professionals who come to our aid. And yet, who is willing to come to their aid when they are facing their own crises? Who is taking care of them during their time of turmoil? Mr. Speaker, it's certainly not this Conservative government. Right now in New Waterford, Mr. Speaker, dozens of healthcare workers are facing a battle for their livelihoods. The majority of these sick people are off work, struggling to pay for treatment to continue to raise their families. And they are doing it, Mr. Speaker, all on their own. There is no question that these people are sick. You only need to look at the mental toxicity of Lindsay McMullen, a baby in her first year of life who was born with these toxins in her system from her mother working at the New Waterford Hospital. The reference range for the amount of arsenic that could possibly be found in a man in his late 30s should be 0.0 - 20.
Lindsay McMullen has arsenic levels of 186.9. There is no denying that this little girl is very sick. Dr. Elizabeth Smith, the expert in environmental occupational health, even though she's only listed with the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons as a general practitioner, stated that the illnesses found in the patients were likely the result of their lifestyles. Likely the result of their lifestyles. How ridiculous a statement to be made by a lady who is not an expert in her field when everybody knows who has anything to do with this case that that's simply not the case. Sean McMullen, father of Lindsay, has gone to great lengths to disprove this theory. He had himself and his eldest daughter tested for metal toxicity, and thankfully their results showed normal levels of all metals tested. This basically blows Dr. Smith's theory out of the water. How, I ask, can Sean and his daughter Leah be absolutely fine when his wife and newborn baby are sick with high levels of metal toxicity? As Sean well explained to the media late last week, we live in the same house, eat the same food, breathe the same air. How can Dr. Smith defend her theory that it is lifestyles that cause their illnesses? Fact is, the lady in question worked at the New Waterford Hospital. Sherry McMullen was pregnant with Lindsay while she was employed at the New Waterford Hospital. She was working alongside other sick patients such as Dr. Duncan McIntyre, Deanna Bray, Joanne Gillis, Kathy Spencer, Darlene McKenzie, just to name a few. The problem is, Mr. Speaker, these people are stuck in purgatory while the government wastes time researching the issue of whether or not they are really sick. Whether or not they are really sick. These people are suffering each day. Their families are suffering, and they are getting no support from this Conservative government. I thought, Mr. Speaker, that in Nova Scotia we had universal health care. That health care was available to people who need health care, and health care was being provided for the people of Nova Scotia who need it. This is not the case here, Mr. Speaker. The government states that they are unsure of whether or not chelation treatment is a proper treatment for patients with high levels of metal toxicity. Well, what is? Why isn't this government searching for options for these people? Why are they letting Nova Scotians, Mr. Speaker, have to resort to their own resources to get necessary medical treatment that should be paid for in a universal health care system? And we pride ourselves all the time, Mr. Speaker, the fact that health care in this province is a right for everybody. It's a right for everybody. So why is it not a right for these people who are sick because of their employment in the Waterford Hospital? And even if the case was made, Mr. Speaker, that somehow they got sick somewhere else, which is a ridiculous premise, they should still have their health care costs covered by the system here in Nova Scotia. Why should these people have to pay out of their own pockets for medical treatment that you and I, Mr. Speaker, members opposite, members on this side, and all Nova Scotians feel is part of the health care system in this province and should be provided? These patients, Mr. Speaker, have sought various treatment options and spent thousands and thousands of dollars, Mr. Speaker, because they are giving absolutely no direction from this government. Matter of fact, each time this question is raised, Mr. Speaker, in the House, each time this question is raised in the media, each time this question is debated on the streets of New Waterford or other areas in Cape Breton, and indeed throughout Nova Scotia, the question always comes up, how did these people get sick? The question also comes up, and I think there's a general feeling that we know how these people got sick. They got sick because they worked in the New Waterford Hospital. You can't tell me that dozens of people are sick with the same disease and all worked in the hospital, and the hospital is not responsible for it. What kind of ridiculous statement is that for anybody in the healthcare field or anybody else who should know what they're talking about be allowed to make? Where they got sick is obvious. But even for one moment, there's any shred of evidence that says that's not the case, if you take a long stretch and say that that may not be the case, the problem is that these people are still sick and are having to pay for the treatment out of their own pocket in a government-funded healthcare system in this province. That is not only an indictment of this government in dealing with this case, that is a tragic circumstance in this province because it could happen again. The next group of people that happen to get sick in the workplace, are they going to be treated the same way if the government does not feel that the public should pay for their medical treatment? We keep talking about universality in health care, but is it only when it suits the parameters of the Department of Health, or whether or not they agree because of perhaps legal liabilities that if they do pay that they might be stuck with some costs down the road? Mr. Speaker, it's not credible for this government to keep making the statement they're studying this issue. What they don't have to study, Mr. Speaker, is that these people are sick. We know that. Hard evidence supports that. So if they're sick, they should be given more consideration by this government than given money for a taxi to get to a clinic, which is what happened in the early stages of this problem. As I said earlier, Mr. Speaker, these people have spent thousands of dollars, some of them out of province, have traveled down to the States, to Ontario, to other places, seeking some remedy that should be available here in Nova Scotia. These people need assistance from the public health care system of this province. They don't need platitudes. They don't need a response from the Minister of Health that will say we're putting another committee together, another study together. You don't have to study the fact that these people are sick. We know they're sick. And we know they've got bills. And what we're asking for, and what we've been continuing to ask for, Mr. Speaker, is why won't the government of this province pay these medical bills for these people who are sick? There should be no discussion, no waiting around. Two things have to happen here, Mr. Speaker. These people have to be directed to the proper place by this government, this health system, where they can get better, where they can have their anxiety of their illness removed by having the illness removed. That's the responsibility of the public health system in this province. The second thing, Mr. Speaker, that we should be doing is immediately telling these people that we're going to look after the costs they've already incurred and the costs they are going to continue to incur in the future. It's a tragedy that here we are in this day and age in this province debating endlessly over whether or not we're going to pay health costs for people who are sick in Nova Scotia. It's not right, and it's an indictment of the health system under this Conservative government. Again, Mr. Speaker, there should be no question about where the liability lies here. The health system in this province has to take care of people who are sick. You know, there are people telling me, Mr. Speaker, that they can't believe the government is denying any responsibility in this matter and continuing to put studies in place that are going to continue to decide whether or not, through various studies, these people are deserving of public support. What they can't deny, Mr. Speaker, the health minister can talk, he can wax eloquent all he wants about what they're doing here, but the fact of the matter is, Mr. Speaker, these people are sick. And Mr. Speaker, if you're sick or if I'm sick today, we go to the hospital, we get treated. What is different about this group of people who contracted their illnesses by working in the public health system? I know the people working in this public health system, Mr. Speaker. I know them. They are people who are dedicated to their jobs, and they're devastated, Mr. Speaker, devastated that because of this illness, they can't work in their professions. We have a doctor, Dr. Duncan McIntyre, who is absolutely revered in our community as one of the finest doctors and specialists that ever practiced in that hospital, and that doctor today is sick. And the very people that he has been looking after over the years, the very health system that he's been supporting, have turned their backs on this doctor and all the other people who work in his office and other offices in the New Waterford Hospital. Mr. Speaker, this cannot be allowed to continue. This is a travesty of justice here that's been allowed to continue by an uncaring health minister and obviously an uncaring Department of Health in this province. I urge, Mr. Speaker, the Department of Health and its ministry, particularly the minister, to do the right thing here and at least acknowledge that the bills from these people should be paid. The tremendous amounts of bills that have been paid by these people should be covered by the public health system. And secondly, I believe there should be a public inquiry held as soon as possible to determine what actually happened in the New Waterford Hospital. What happened to allow this situation to get to the stage where it is today? Mr. Speaker, we keep hearing about new cases. People are continuing to be tested, so the list is growing. Is it a situation where the government and the Department of Health do not want to accept liability here because of what may happen in the future in terms of litigation? Is that the problem? Are the spin doctors, are the lawyers telling them don't admit anything here? Because if you will, Mr. Speaker, it'll come back to bite us. Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm talking about doing the right thing for these people who are sick. I'm talking about a caring attitude instead of a legal attitude towards this situation. These people are sick. We know how they got sick. We know that they're spending thousands of dollars of their own money. We know that some of them can't work and are unlikely to work for some time. All they're asking for is to be treated the same, Mr. Speaker, treated the same as other people in Nova Scotia who fall ill, either through environmental illness or any other type illness that they may have contracted in the workplace or otherwise. We sometimes, Mr. Speaker, feel that the health care system is going to be there for us no matter what. We feel that because it's a universal health care system. Well, Mr. Speaker, the health care system has let the workers of the New Waterford Hospital down. And they're feeling that. They're feeling they've been disowned by the system and left to their own resources. Mr. Speaker, that is a tragic indictment of that minister and that health department in this day and age in this province. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognized all member for Annapolis on introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to draw the member's attention to the West Gallery. I want to introduce from my riding and from the Middleton area, Archdeacon Eric McDonald, Vera Arrington, and Sylvester Atkinson. They've all been tremendous community organizers, and they're here today to have a meeting hoping to get some support for a nursing home in the Middleton area. Just as a side note, Vera's daughter, Lori, works for the New Democratic Party in the caucus office as a researcher, so I'd like everyone to give them a warm welcome.
Thank you. Certainly welcome our guests to the gallery today and hope they enjoy the proceedings. I recognize the honourable member for Eastern Shore.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before I start my comments today, I must say that by surprise, I am not the scheduled speaker going into supply this afternoon, that I'm filling in for the good member from Colchester Musquodoboit because of certain business he's unable to speak just now. But I can tell you that on Monday, going into supply, he will be bringing his interesting comments about his constituency and the important things that he would like to share with his constituents and the rest of the people of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we stand here today almost on the eve of the anniversary of when we gathered here the Progressive Conservative government to take on the very responsible role of governing this province. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that I can remember it quite well. At that particular time, we arrived here, and things were new to us. The process and the procedure of this House was exciting and challenging. But I can tell you now, Mr. Speaker, as we become somewhat veterans of this House, we now can act and perform in a more relaxed nature. Mr. Speaker, the process of this House is a very important process in which we've been afforded to under the guidelines of democracy. It is very important that the people of Nova Scotia can go to the polls after making a final decision on who they should have represent them in their government or representatives of their community. And once that person takes on that responsibility, Mr. Speaker, they must realize quickly the responsibilities that comes along with this job. There are a number of responsibilities, Mr. Speaker. Number one, as we stand here in this House, we must address and be a part of this process. This process, Mr. Speaker, gives us an opportunity to talk about the things that are important to us, the things that are important to our constituents. Now, Mr. Speaker, if you happen to follow this on the local TV channel, you will notice that on this side of the House would be the government, on that side of the House would be the opposition. And quite often you will see in question period or in debate that the opposition members have ample opportunity to stand in their place and question the government about certain things that the government wants to be a part of, or certain things that the government wants to go forward with. Now, the members of the government, such as the backbenchers, Mr. Speaker, we're not afforded that opportunity in the same way. Now, probably someone would challenge that comment, because we know we do have the right to stand, and quite often members will stand on certain issues in this House. But it's the practice of the government members to raise their questions in caucus, Mr. Speaker. And I want to tell that the viewing public, just because they're not seeing their members of the Progressive Conservative Caucus challenging the front benches, I want to assure you tonight, Mr. Speaker, that there are very capable representatives on this side of the House that pose their questions in caucus. And I want to tell you that I thank this government for the support, Mr. Speaker, that they give the backbenches and their colleagues in this government. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you today that it's without question, Mr. Speaker, the greatest gift that we have is the ability to come to this House and to bring our concerns and have our concerns addressed. Mr. Speaker, I could stand here this afternoon and talk for hours. Matter of fact, as I said earlier, I didn't realize this morning that I was going to speak, but I did have an opportunity to be passed some notes, Mr. Speaker, but I'm not going to speak from the notes. Mr. Speaker, I'm going to talk just from my heart, Mr. Speaker. There's no doubt about that. I could stand here in this House and talk about the benefits that this government has given to the people of the Eastern Shore for many, many hours. I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, and make it clear some of the things that I stand for. I stand for the premise of democracy. I stand for the right to be able to come in here and gather the constituents' concerns and bring it to this government. And I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, without a doubt, my main concern, my priorities in this job is to be able to bring those concerns to this government. And I've been very successful, Mr. Speaker. We talk about issues in here such as who believes in the Senate and who does not believe in the Senate. We talk about issues in here, Mr. Speaker, about what party leader would do the best for governing Canada or governing the province. But I want to tell you, the advantage of coming here is that you can hear and allow all those barriers and hurdles to be moved aside and talk about the very personal things that are important to our constituents. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I could stand here today and tell you about the roads, the road improvements of the Eastern Shore. I could stand here and talk about our new schools that have been placed or will be placed on the Eastern Shore. I can talk today, Mr. Speaker, about our hospital and how important our hospital is to the people on the Eastern Shore. And I can tell you that Mr. Speaker, that this government has assured this member that this hospital in Musquodoboit Harbour, the Twin Oaks Hospital, is safe and it is secured and the emergency facilities are there. I want to tell the people of the Eastern Shore that they can feel confident that this government has allowed this hospital to be remained open, even though the budget restraints of health care are certainly a serious issue that we address daily in here as we hear opposition members talk and speak to government. I want to assure the people of the Eastern Shore that they are not to worry about their hospital. I want to tell the people of the Eastern Shore that the roads are improving. I want to tell the people of the Eastern Shore that this government knows that education is important and we're addressing those concerns. I want to tell the people of the Eastern Shore that tourism is important on the Eastern Shore, and as a member I recognize that and speak to the Minister of Tourism often about things and improvements and about things that I'm able to bring home to benefit the people and the economy on the Eastern Shore. I know, Mr. Speaker, that I've stood in my place here many, many times, and I've talked about the Eastern Shore not having great economic generators, but the generators, Mr. Speaker, the generators of the Eastern Shore are the people themselves. People have a responsibility to look after themselves on the Eastern Shore. It's sort of a bedroom community, but I want to tell you, with the movements and the advancements that are taking place on the Eastern Shore, that there's going to be a bit of a turn there. And I know that great things are to come. Great things have been happening, and great things are coming to the Eastern Shore. I also want to make it clear my stand on the Ship Harbor Long Lake. I know the people in this House have challenged me often in conversation. I want to make sure that that particular area is there. I want to make sure that that particular area is kept clean and healthy, so that the people of not only the Eastern Shore but the people of the province can enjoy. The Ship Harbor Long Lake, Mr. Speaker, is something that I'm very proud of, that I've been very involved in, and we're going to make sure that that's there for a long, long time for people to enjoy. I stand here and talk about the good things of the Eastern Shore, but not unlike any other riding, we have some concerns. Yes, we do have some bridges, Mr. Speaker, that need repair. There's no doubt about that. I can stand here today and talk about the Candy Mountain Road Bridge. We're having difficulties with that. I know right now, because of the effect of Hurricane Juan, that the people are struggling to get rid of their brush, and we talk daily about burning bylaws. I know also, Mr. Speaker, that I can stand here and tell you that I am an MLA in the HRM, and I'll tell you that sometimes can be challenging, because I used to represent in my last mandate from Ecum-Secum to Porters Lake and Lawrencetown, and I want to tell you that the people were not so very happy when the decision was to join the HRM. And at that time, I can remember stating clearly that someday we will be adopting the rules and the policies of the core area or the urban area.
Order, please. The members of the House accorded the courtesy of the last two members to hear them in their statements. I'd ask all members to accord the same courtesy to the member on the floor at the time. Thank you. The honourable member for Eastern Shore has the floor.
Speaker. But like I said, Mr. Speaker, we can stand and talk for hours about our riding. But I want to tell you, we are a part of the HRM, and Mr. Speaker, that's what we're faced with. And I want to tell, from time to time, there's controversy between the province and the HRM. And I stand here in my place and say that should not be. I stand here today and say that I cannot believe that certain people of the HRM are having difficulty with some of the policies that have been laid down with this government. And as you know, I was a part of that HRM. And at that time, even though I had difficulty with becoming a part of the core unit, once there, Mr. Speaker, I had to make sure that I worked in a fashion that was appropriate, a fashion that was beneficial to the people of the Eastern Shore. And I just want to say, Mr. Speaker, today, I cannot believe the controversy that takes place between the province and the HRM. And I suggest that there should be a more cooperative, movement to work together and for us to enjoy all the benefits of our great province and within our great HRM. Mr. Speaker, I talked about the good things, starting to talk about some of the stands that I believe in, and I know when we start talking about the HRM, we have to talk about the situation about roads. We have to talk about subdivisions, which all people that are within the core area are having difficulty. There soon has to be a movement, Mr. Speaker, to resolve the situation of subdivision. Who owns the subdivisions, the province or the HRM? Who maintains the subdivision, the province or the HRM? I believe it's necessary for us to sit down at the table with the HRM soon and clear up the controversy that surrounds the subdivisions. And I say these bylaws that are in place that, Mr. Speaker, from time to time will hurt the rural people. Just because we are a part of the HRM does not necessarily mean that we should be governed by all core or downtown policies. And I say that in fairness. So I guess I would like to have more support in that area. Mr. Speaker, you know, it's a great opportunity to stand here and to talk about your riding. Now, one issue we have as rural representatives is communicating. You know, our areas are very large unlike some urban areas. And quite often, the only opportunity we have to communicate with our constituents would be through a newsletter, which you send out monthly, or the local paper, which is sent out monthly, or sometimes we have to call emergency meetings. And I want to tell you that I would ask the constituents of all rural areas, of all ridings in Nova Scotia, if they have issues that they would like to address or questions that they would like to have answered, the most appropriate way to do that would be to call the MLA and ask directly the question that they would like to have answered. Because I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, I've been in this House for over close to 5 years now, and I know they're very confident and competent MLAs in this House on both sides, and I'll say that. I know that it's the wish for each MLA to make their riding a good riding, to bring home good gifts for the people they represent, regardless of the party. Now, some of the party philosophies that we share in here may differ. There's no doubt about it. I would say the people sitting on this side of the House would have generally the same, well, Mr. Speaker, the right philosophy. I would say that. I would say that, and I believe that. And I would say the people on that side have a fear philosophy sometimes on certain issues, and quite often they do shine from time to time on certain issues, and I'll give them that. And I know, and I know from time to time, they like to stand up and talk about things that are important to them. But the issue is, we're all elected officials. We all have a job to do. And Mr. Speaker, I believe that we all try to do our best. If, Mr. Speaker, you want to be an MLA, if you're not serious about being an MLA, if you do not want to work on the behalf of your constituents, I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, the constituents will soon tell you that they're not, or that you are not in their favor. It is a demanding job. And from time to time, we feel hesitant to defend ourselves. We feel, I guess, that we should not tell the constituents about the responsibilities that we have. And I think that's wrong, Mr. Speaker. I think as representatives that we should take great pride in the job that we're doing. And I believe my time is up, Mr. Speaker. So I do thank you for the time. Yeah, I do.
Thank you. Motion is carried. Motion is carried. Finishing your time. I'll recognize the Deputy House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I would like to call for the estimates of the Department of Education.
The estimates of the Department of Education. Time is 2:48. And I'll recognize the honourable member for Halifax Needham, and you have 2 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have a very short period of time in which to explore a topic that is of great concern, certainly to me and members of my constituency, and perhaps I'll get back to the minister before the day is out. But I want to start by telling the minister that my concern is around school suspensions. I want to ask the minister if the Department of Education monitors suspension data from the boards, and if it reviews suspension policy from the boards. And the reason I ask this is that increasingly in the constituency I represent, and I know in other constituencies, there's concern that young people are being suspended from school to the streets, where they fall further and further behind in their ability to participate in the curriculum. When they go back to school, the issues that have contributed to their suspension are often not dealt with, and eventually those young people leave school, and they're lost. Their education is lost. And so my first questions are around, does the department monitor the suspension policies of the board and the practices, and look at the data and look at ways to intervene or improve the situation?
The Honourable Minister of Education, and there's about 5 seconds left in the NDP time. Cumberland.
Thank you, Chair. The board does not formally monitor the suspensions. I can tell you, though, that regional educators, what would you call them now? Suspension? REOs. Anyway, they attend board meetings, and they would receive any reports that the board does receive. Now, I can tell you that in my home constituency, a board member with whom I talk on perhaps a little bit more occasion than some of the others, he had a particular concern about that, and he did bring in data to me, and I did review that. As you know, the department implemented a school code of conduct for schools, and the in-servicing is going on that. But do we formally monitor or require formal reporting of that to us? No, we do not.
Thank you, Minister. Time has expired. I'll recognize the Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll be sharing my time with my honourable colleague from Kings West, and also with the member from Cumberland South. Mr. Chair, the Minister will find some of what I'm saying repetitive, but I find that the topic is of great importance to bear repetition on some of the points, and I would also like to expand and add some new points. In the last time I spoke to the Honourable Minister, I mentioned the combination of the new school that's proposed for the north side, combining 4 schools into one. A new school is very well welcomed, Mr. Minister, in that area. Some of those schools are very outdated, long past their shelf life. Some of them I've inquired, and some of them do not have gymnasiums. They're that old that they don't have a gymnasium. My concern at that time was combining 4 gymnasiums into one, and also the fact that you're taking junior high school students and combining them with elementary students. And I pointed out that in today's society, sometimes it's by the time they reach junior high, there's some very negative things that happen with the youth in today's society, and I was fearful of the fact that the elementary kids would be exposed to that. I look at the large schools. I don't know if there's been any studies done, Mr. Minister, or any follow-up to these new schools. But one of my fears is the fact that over and above losing community identity, I've stated the economic impact of communities because of the activity to and from the schools, not only from the students and the parents, but teachers, staff, administration, and general activities throughout the communities that people travel to and from schools for. And also the fact that schools are and have become the focal point of towns now, that not only are they an education center, but they're an activity center. The Honourable Minister of Recreation points to the fact that the government is concentrating on active living, and with that, the addition of new gymnasiums is very welcomed. But at the same time, there will be one large gymnasium rather than even two, one in Sydney Mines and one in North Sydney. When I start to talk about the size of the school, and was there any studies done or any follow-up, I'm wondering, are we getting to a point where we are creating education factories as compared to educational schools? A school, to me, Mr. Minister, has not an overly large population of students. It creates for a better teacher-student ratio, and you seem to have that personal feeling when you're involved in a school or a school complex. When it becomes too large, almost like the large university institutions, you get away, you almost become, this is my terminology, nobody else's, when I talk about an educational factory, where the kids come in one end and they go out the other, and they lose that, it becomes impersonal, not intentionally. Not that the teachers don't care as much anymore, or that the administration is not as concerned, but it's just the sheer size and numbers and the complexities that a large school would create. We're talking 850 students with numerous junior high classrooms and numerous elementary classrooms, and that's what I fear that would be lost here. I don't have any statistics to show that the large school is negative or positive, and that's why I was wondering, maybe I could ask the Honourable Minister, to his knowledge, has there been any follow-up done on these large schools to show a positive or negative effect?
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Honourable Member, for that question. And it is an interesting one, and for we who have a background in education know that there's really no concise answer. And first of all, you have to define what a small school was. Well, a lot of the small school literature a few years ago talked to 750 students was a small school. There was a move at one time towards larger schools. So what you're talking about is your neighborhood schools. Now, I just want to talk about large schools. One of these schools of this province that I'm particularly proud of is the one that's in my community, the high school there, which is Cobequid Educational Center, which I suppose it would be those who would disagree with me, but I figured it was the finest high school in the province. And I am a bit biased, but nevertheless. But it had 1,700 students, and it does have 1,700 students. That's my point. On the other hand, the Honourable Member, when you look at rankings, there was some information come out a few years ago that said that Advocate, and I forget who did the ranking, the school at Advocate Harbour, which was a P to 12 school, was it Ames? It was. Somebody said it was Ames, and they rated that as the top school in the province. To me, last night I had the great pleasure of visiting the Lunenburg Academy, which is a P to 6 school, I guess it is, P to 5, P to 6, and they had the work of the students on display there, and clearly one of the things that makes that Lunenburg Academy, and I guess both schools, because they are interrelated there, such a good thing is because the community believes in those schools and participates in them, and the teachers care about the students, and they do everything they can for them. And if you have good folks working in schools, I don't think size is as important as you think it is. I can remember some number of years ago, I guess probably in about 1997 or 1996, attending a meeting on behalf of the then leader of the Progressive Conservative Party over in the constituency of the member from Pictou West. And as you know, one of the proud things that happened in Pictou County this year was the opening of 2 high schools. And it was the discussions leading. I went to a community meeting in Scottsburn one night at the fire hall there, and I was not a member then, but I think I must have been a candidate then, because I was a candidate for a long time. Attending that meeting, and the people were concerned about a really large school. And the school at Alma has, how many?
Oh, the new 1,100.
Got 1,100 students, and the community was talking about it being a very large school. But you know, when West Pictou High was going full bore, which is the school it was replacing, it had more students than that, yet it was not considered a large school. And I want to tell you that if up in your area, if you go to the member from New Waterford, represents New Waterford, Cape Breton, East, West, North, whatever, Center, Cape Breton Center, Beck one time had 2,000 students. And I don't know, I never heard it referred to as a large school, but I often heard it referred to as a real good school. And now Beck has roughly about half the population, of course, which is one of the factors up there. So the evidence on small schools, big schools is not real conclusive. I think there are studies who would say that large schools, they're more efficient, greater variety of courses, more for students, more support, more resources when you have a critical mass. You also have the situation where small schools, the intimacy, the parents walking into the schools every day, particularly the elementary level with their children, make for a very good product. One of the first, I wouldn't say delights I had, I would say that very, well, it was pretty rough. When I began my career with the Department of Education, there was then an elementary school in Collingwood. And some of you may remember that. And that was one of those schools where you could sort of eat off the floor and the whole thing. But, you know, there were a whole bunch of schools. You know the geography of that county. Lots of, well, it's like your area. Well, I guess would be like the area, you know, for your colleagues. Anyway, they took a teacher out of that school, and that was a great, the school board made that decision, and it was very, very difficult on that community because, you know, one of the things at school, and somebody asked me a question in here about core French the other day. I think it may have been the member for Halifax Atlantic or from Halifax Shabak or maybe from Halifax Needham. You know, that was a primary school, that Collingwood school that began French in the primary grade because they had somebody to do it. So, you know, sometimes small is good and sometimes larger is good. But today, you know, you want more support services, you want, I'm going to say, bells and whistles for students. For example, when I was down in Lunenburg last night, we had the privilege of having the junior high band entertain us. And, you know, if there wasn't a certain critical mass, then you're not going to have the band program. And, you know, if you want to be able to organize certain activities in your schools, you do need a critical mass to do that. So I would say that the research is mixed. If you get up to the high school level where I guess, you know, it really depends on the teachers. The teachers and then the community is involved in the school and likes the school and participates in the school, and the teachers do more than simply come in and do their 9 to 3 or 9 to 4, whatever it is, and you know, our contributors work with students after hours and do those things. And most of the good schools in the province, that's what marks them, is the school community, not the size of the school.
Thank you, Minister. The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Lakes, Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. Another point that I'd like to concentrate on, I don't know if the Minister would be involved in this or not, but the community consultation that has gone on or hopefully will go on when the site selection of the school comes forward. I understand that there is a committee in place already that are searching out different sites. I understand that they have possibly as high as a dozen sites to choose from. They have to narrow that down to a number, probably 3 or 4 or whatever, and then make a final selection. So that's ongoing now, and I believe that the community should be involved, and I would imagine that would be a part of the local school board and not for the department itself, or would the department get involved in the final selection, or when it gets, where would your department become involved in, when it's narrowed down to 3, or when it's narrowed to 3 and then one is suggested?
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Chairman, before I answer that question, there was a comment that I was going to make in reference to your last question about the combination of schools up in your area having to do with the gyms. You know that those schools, I think, will be going back to the community, and if the community wishes to use them for community purposes, that would be a decision for the municipality. Now, there may be one of those belongs to the church, I don't know, but in general, they will be reverting back to the municipality, and if they so choose to keep those facilities open for community recreation, that would be their decision. Now, you talked about school site selection. The department is involved in two ways. First of all, the department sets the criteria for school sites. In other words, they have to be so big, you know, the typical things, the standards that you would have for a building lot, regardless of if it was a school or a commercial building or a home or something. You know, I think if you're, for example, in Pictou County, I guess, I think you need an acre lot, or Colchester County, you've got to put a septic system in. You know, I mean, all of these things. So those standards are established by the Department of Education. There is then a local group called a school steering team. A school steering team, and they actually get into the site selection business. Now, that is not a group of the Department of Education. That's a group of the school board or representatives, or somewhere along the line the school board gets one of these things together. It really usually involves representatives from the community, representatives from the school, and also board representatives. So they go out and they do this site selection search. They are required, now I say this marginally because we had a report from one of these that did not adhere to that this year. They are to recommend 3 sites, and comes into the minister. The department staff then does a departmental assessment of those sites, and the minister would select one.
Thank you, Minister. Honourable Member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. I'd like to now concentrate on I don't know if it's curriculum or just the school. The French immersion is what I'm pointing to. And French immersion is something that I think it's critical, that should be taught in the schools. And what I would like to see is French immersion, a program or a policy or a process put in place that I know everything that you do is an additional expense, but French immersion should be as a minimum being offered at least in all the junior high schools. After such time, it could be slowly phased downward so that it could eventually, hopefully, get into the elementary, because you know yourself, the younger they are, they seem to be like little sponges. It's a lot easier to teach them at an early age to speak French, and simply because it's something that will last any graduate the rest of their lives. I've traveled reasonably extensively around, and everywhere I have been fortunate enough to travel, those persons in the group that were bilingual always seem to be having a leg up on any one of us single language persons who, if we were in Portugal or Spain or Mexico, Portuguese and Spanish and Mexican, it's so close to being of the French. The French-speaking group could always find out what was going on and were a leg up, like I said, on everyone else. But the very fact of the French immersion program, and then have it, like I said, as I said the other day, you should know where you want to be in 5 years and definitely where you intend to be in 10. To address the cost of that, we stop and think of, I point to write-offs let's just say government departments. Most businesses, all businesses, sooner or later have write-offs. We hear of people getting bonuses and things for superior performances and whatnot, which is fine, and people are rewarded. But when you have such large write-offs in some departments, that's money that's gone forever. If there's some way that could be curtailed, I see that there's over $2 million owing in student loans. The money is easy when it's gotten, but it's extremely hard to pay back. It seems to me that that's kind of been an ongoing problem for quite some time to get it up to that amount of debt. I don't know if what I'm going to suggest is going to resonate good or bad with students or whatnot, but when you are given a loan is a loan and you have to pay it back. There should be some mechanism put in place that they agreed to at the time of borrowing to guarantee that it'll be paid back. You could list your social insurance number. You could sign a document or something that's willing to pay back a certain percentage after you graduate, not the first month after you graduate and then you got this massive payment coming due, but after they graduate and they begin to earn an income, they should have to have a certain amount of net income which would allow them to live reasonably. Then once they hit that level, then maybe a 5% or something could come off of their pay automatically. The same as we pay income tax, we pay health care, it could automatically come off. But what I'm searching for is some way that when the money goes out, there's a guaranteed way for it to come back in again. So that way that's not money that's out there laying dormant. It's money that could be put into the education system. It was given for college students. It could be put back into the college system. The write-offs from the province, from those departments, could be put into the French immersion program. And French immersion, as far as I'm concerned, travels right along with the music. Those are the benefits that sometimes get trimmed off first. When the financial crunch comes, we'll trim French immersion. We'll cut out the music program. Well, forget about the band. What's the band anyway? But when a kid learns an instrument, as I told my own family when they traveled off to college, never mind where you go, whether you know anybody there in the university you're traveling to or not, take your instrument with you. Look up the local players. Take your instrument. You've got an instant group of maybe not friends, but good people you can make a relationship with. You've got something in common. So if you take your saxophone or whatever you play and you travel to Europe or you travel to Ontario, it's an in for you. So what I'm wondering is if there's some kind of a futuristic plan for the French immersion in these schools that we're building to lower it down from junior high, and I say junior high because I have a grandson who skipped going to the school that he normally would have gone to and traveled in to Sydney Mines because of the French immersion program, and the French immersion program wasn't offered in the school that was closest to him. And so I suppose there's an additional busing expenses there for the school board where students are bypassing this junior high and going on to a further one. But it's the reality that if you want the extras, you have to try and achieve them. So I was just hoping, or do you have some kind of a vision of creating a program to keep working down through the grades, making them lower to for French immersion, and increasing the funding for the school bands, Mr. Minister? Thank you.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chair. The Honourable Member raises 3 or 4 very interesting items. Let me talk first for a few minutes about student loans. And I believe I tabled some information the other day, which was $2 million and some write-offs in student loans, and somebody asked me, was this the first time this had happened? Well, it was the first time it was reported, because the way student loans used to work in the province, when the system was first set up, the government had worked out a deal with Royal Bank of Canada, and I think there may one year have been other banks as well, because I know I've dealt with the Bank of Commerce as a constituent person, where the banks literally took most of the risk, and the province had a 10% guarantee. So if you were a student and you had a $20,000 loan, which you chose to default on, the bill to the province was $2,000. The way the banks obviously, and I guess, didn't really like that arrangement after they got into it, and anyway, they were going to indeed withdraw, and effectively the province became the guarantor of the student loans. And our default rate right now, we're fairly early into it. We're going to need 2 or 3 more years before we can make a real decision, is that it's around 10%. We would sooner it was 0% or that the collection rate was 100%, which I'm led to believe by staff that it's probably comparable to other jurisdictions in Canada. So the default, we're at 20? I'm sorry, we are at 20. I thought we were going to move to 20, and I started off with 10 because it's going to get up each year because of we are only recent into this, and of course the loans are just starting to come through. Now that is a lot, and a student loan is a debt to the Crown, so you can't dismiss it. You can't say, well, I'm bankrupt and I'm not going to pay my student loan, because it becomes a debt you owe. If it's a debt to the Crown, I guess you have it until you pay it off. And I want to tell you that I know for many people it is, they get student loans, they end up with substantial debts, and it is very difficult to pay off those loans. And, but I want to tell you is that once you leave school, you basically have a 6-month holiday, or at least interest holiday, which is picked up by the province. So, you don't have to start paying the day you get out of school. Now, unfortunately, some people could start to pay the day you go to school, but they choose to delay it for 6 months, and the province picks that up. And I can tell you as well, from personal experience, a family member of mine who had a student loan and actually had a job, but anyway got hurt and couldn't do it for a while. So the student loan people, I'm told, were they were fairly considerate that way. So the student loan, I can tell you that people sometimes, and probably without a great deal of knowledge base, they get mad at the student loan division because they are doing this and doing that. But I do know from working in the department in the period of time I've been there that they look at every case individually, and if there are extenuating circumstances, then they will either they don't try to hound you to death. And you have, if you can't pay, you just can't get a job, you have up to 3 years of interest relief. That. In addition, last year, this government introduced a student loan, a student loan or a student debt reduction program. And, it was another way that government chose to invest in, universities, community colleges, some private trade colleges, and the students to try and build a stronger Nova Scotia. And if a person has full advantage of that debt reduction program, which includes, by the way, making regular payments and doing things like that, then it's possible to get up to about 40% of your loan, a debt reduction program of about 40%. Now, this new debt relief program has just been implemented. I think when I look at it objectively, I think my predecessors in the portfolio and of course the senior staff that worked that out, they did a good thing. Now it's not perfect, and we hear a lot of people stand up on the floor of this legislature and say, well, really, why is not higher education free? And the implication that if a student leaves the university or a trade school or a private career college or whatever it is with a debt, that's the government's fault. Well, we all know that you can't keep giving something away for nothing. I mean, everybody understands that. But the government really, in its commitment to education, has really looked at those things, and this debt reduction program, I think I think is really going to help. You know, there are going to be some the Students Assistance Office in Nova Scotia. You know, we processed this past year about 10,000 student loan applications. You know, and what you will find is that you remember in the federal budget there were the federal government announced that such things as parental contributions and some modifications in their criteria, we use their criteria. Now I want to tell you those modifications were probably due to the actions of my predecessor. Nova Scotia was the one who raised that at the Council of Ministers and drew it to the attention of the federal government, so they stand to be congratulated for, I really think that, you know, we got the support of the other jurisdictions, but when the federal government responded to that, then probably the people who were in our Department of Education deserve credit for it. I was not there then, so but I'll take the credit if you want to give it to me, but I really wasn't there then. But, you know, the other thing that the federal government has done, which is in some ways a mixed blessing, we're talking about the cost of higher education, is that in their budget changes, they have improved access. They make it easier for people to get into higher education. The student loans, you know, they've changed those criteria. Therefore, it's easier to get a loan. You can get more money and this type of thing. But what was not done was that they didn't provide additional operating money for the institutions. There was no more money, quote, for higher education. So what's going to happen is the reason they made the access and increased the loans is because they, you know, you put it in one end or you take it out the other. Well, if you put it in the lower end, it's we folks who get to pick up about 50% of it or something like that. Is that in the first year? And you know, it wasn't a download, but you know, I really think if it in its budget deliberations had been able to provide more money for higher education, then, you know, a sort of a balance between the improvements in the student loan program, which obviously had a price tag with them. Government doesn't do anything, virtually doesn't have a price tag, is that maybe some of that price tag might have been used for operating, and you could balance it off that way. You talked, the honourable member also talked, Mr. Chair, about French immersion programs, and that has been on the floor here in Halifax, and of course Halifax, I guess, was the jurisdiction that got into it first, and continues into it. Whether we should have an immersion program in every junior high. I don't think so. We're talking about critical mass again, and the other thing that you have to weigh is that if you put some of these programs where you have a very limited number of students, what does it do to the other program for the bulk of the students? I mean, if you put in a French immersion program, then it means that, you know, so if you have a critical mass of students, then you can provide that program and a lot more easily than if you don't have the critical mass. And the other thing you have to remember about French immersion programs is that, you know, you get, I don't know, we started one in Truro and they put it on a quota system, but students drop out every year. So I don't know exactly what the dropout statistics is, but if you take here in Halifax, the numbers who went at primary and the numbers who finished at up the upper end, it's going like that because the numbers aren't there. So how yours is, you really have to think about that. So we're talking about critical mass. The question early immersion, late immersion, high school immersion remains really unanswered. One of the things that most schools, or more and more schools have is this thing called the extended core French. It goes in usually at the junior high school and continues on through high school, where students who have some facility in the French language, is not an immersion program, but they have social studies, and social studies is one, and one or two other courses that are offered in the French language. Now, I was going to say they're offering English in the French language, and then I decided that probably wasn't such a good statement. But, you know, anyway, would I like to see every student in Canada be able to speak both languages? Personally, yes. I can read a fair bit of French, but my oral and listening skills are substandard. Well, maybe they aren't substandard because a lot of people can't do it either, but they aren't really very good. And despite the fact that when I look at my academic background, I have a university minor in French. In the days when you did not have to speak French, you could do that. Yeah. Beg pardon? Oh, oui? Oh, yeah. Monsieur le Président? So, anyway, French immersion is good. However, the distribution of those resources, and there are support monies from the Department of Education where people wish to implement that, and it is primarily, it's a protocol between the provinces or our province and the federal government which allows that money to flow. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Victoria the Lakes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Maybe I used the wrong terminology with French immersion. Maybe the option could be there in junior and elementary for a French program over a period of time, maybe not the full French immersion. But that's a thought that the minister maybe could have. And with that, Mr. Chair, I would like to turn the remainder of the time over to my honourable colleague here.
Thank you. I'll recognize the member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, I want to start off today, and I want to. I guess we're all in a fairly congenial mood here on this very nice Nova Scotia day. But I want to commend the minister for apologizing to teachers across Nova Scotia, perhaps in particular to the grade 12 teachers who have been in the spotlight as a result of the provincial exam. So I do pass that on to the minister today. And in speaking about teachers, I want to start off today with teacher education. And we know that at the current time, there's seemingly, perhaps at least a bit off the record, that we may come up short in some of the areas like math and sciences in terms of teacher education, teacher preparation, from what I'm hearing from the schools of education. And I'm wondering if the minister could comment upon that and perhaps what direction his department may be giving the schools to improve the situation.
Thank you, member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
The honourable member, Mr. Chairman, brings the floor once again a problem that we've had in the schools of Nova Scotia for quite some time, and that's to get sufficient numbers of people who have a strong background in mathematics or physics or chemistry or mathematics, physics, chemistry, or some other specialized subject, more specialized subjects to enter teacher education. All I can tell you is that in my experience in teacher education, which was a few institutions, that we would literally go out and try, if we found math students and physics students and chemistry students, go out and approach them to see that they would be interested in a career in education. Now, the honourable member knows from that business we've always had that problem, and it's not getting any easier. I don't think you try to attract, every board knows where shortages are, and it goes out and recruits. And one of the things that the province has done the last couple of years is this early hiring fairs. And they've had it at every university, every teacher training institution in Nova Scotia. And the intent for that is, as you know, the way the union, of course, had to be a supporter of this, is that if there were math and physics and French and you pick some of these other subjects, people, if you come to university, you're looking for a job. And in some ways, the first person to come along and offer you a job. And if you're young and unencumbered, then you might go to the best, the first offer. I mean, we find in Nova Scotia a lot of people have come back home. They go someplace else, but they find that they miss Nova Scotia, and we get a number of teachers who have gone to other jurisdictions and then want to come back and live in Nova Scotia. The job fairs last year were a success, and I think over 400 applications, and from those applicants, the school boards in the early hire process took about 100 people. And say these job fairs help the school boards to hire teachers in the demand areas such as French, math, and science before they are recruited by boards outside of Nova Scotia or even outside of Canada. And the teacher training institutions, I expect, are doing the same thing that we did, is to go to university campuses and encourage students who are good academic students, and particularly in those areas where there is a shortage of qualified teachers in the public school, a skills shortage, I guess we wanted to call it, to encourage those people, to talk to them about education, to try to encourage them to apply for it, and hopefully they will apply, be accepted, like it, have a successful program, and flow through to our schools. It's a tough situation. It's even tougher right now these days with for substitutes in some boards. They tell me that substitutes in some school subjects, in some areas, the problems are really very, very difficult, really very, very difficult to find. But I know that the boards work very hard at that, and school administrators work very hard at building up a bank of names that they can call should they need substitutes. One other factor in this is too, Chairman, and as the honourable member well knows, is that people are basically, I think, still hired as teachers. And a teacher is a teacher. And this is one of the areas where a larger school is, has an advantage. You get up to high school, and if a person has a mathematics background, then they probably want to teach mathematics. And their physics background, they want to do the physics. And if they have the chemistry background, they want to do the chemistry. And the French, they want to do the French. And sometimes, again, critical mass of fellows in a department, but in the smaller schools, you might end up teaching other subjects that you aren't quite as familiar with. And, and sometimes teaching assignments are, we've all been through that. You've got a teaching assignment, and then there's an add-on because somebody has to do it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work as well, and I guess in a larger school it usually works well because you have a greater pool to draw from. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I guess perhaps I've got some, information there, but I believe firmly the time has come that there are now targeted needs in the province, and perhaps even some school boards with even greater needs. And I'm wondering if the Department of Education and government are concerned to the point that as we have this exit of 35 to 40% of our teachers over the next 5 to 8 years, that in fact we are going to have to look at recruitment for our schools of education of a percentage for those disciplines that do require strong undergraduate preparation as well as their teaching certificate.
Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Chairman. And the honourable member is right. To my knowledge, the schools of education are doing that now and have done it for some time. I know the last one at which I worked was St. Francis Xavier University, and we did everything we could there to try and attract, as you talk about the subject areas, teachers who had expertise and a strong subject matter background for the, you get up in some of those courses at high school are, they're what you used to get in 2 or 3 years of university, and you really need a strong academic background to be able to cope with them.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Kings West.
I guess a natural tie-in then to teacher preparation. I recently spoke with a teacher who has instructed at Acadia University and has been a mentor teacher in the elementary math of the province. And he does point out what I think is part, or I believe in part, with the math dilemma that we are currently facing and continues to come back to us through low provincial and low national scores. And he was talking about the reality that in at least 2 of our 3 BED programs, all teachers are required to go into the classroom to teach math is a 1/2 credit in math methods. In other words, 1/2 education credit. And I would certainly, challenge the minister perhaps that is an area that we do need some attention drawn to, and I would like his comments in that regard.
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
I'd have to go back, Mr. Chairman, and review the requirements, but I think certainly he may be right in terms of the methods course, but I'm going from memory, but I thought they needed 1 or 2 university math courses to get into the program. I think there is a prescription, and I know that there were some students who then had to take math during the summer or something like that to make up a deficiency. I'd have to check that for you.
Minister. The Honourable Member for Kings West.
I guess, and again, once again, in terms of preparation, I know that a teachable now can, I think, be as few as 2 university courses, perhaps 3, and I'm wondering if that indeed is sufficient when we start to take a look at our high school courses. And we know that in addition to good methods and good teaching ability, we also need strong foundation. And I'm wondering once again, especially in terms of our math programs, in fact, are all teachers, or the majority of our teachers, well prepared for that challenge?
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Chair, we do have some statistics on that. The most recent study with which we are familiar was one done in New Brunswick. Clearly, the member is saying that, as I said, some of the academic courses, the more advanced courses at high school, you need a pretty strong background to do it. Well, you have to really understand it, I guess, to do it well. And there's probably room for some improvement in the province.
I'll move on to a document that was produced in the province this year by the Nova Scotia School Board Association, the Lead and Achieve document. Again, it was another opportunity, a window to look into our schools and classrooms across the province. And I believe, if my memory serves correct, that 30 communities were visited by that initiative. And I'm wondering what the department is taking from that particular document that they consider to be, again, priorities that will dovetail with the Department of Education. So I'm just wondering what kind of prominence that perhaps that document is being given, or is it simply one that perhaps is not as relevant? I would like to hear the minister's comments, please.
Thank you, member. The Minister of Education.
Chairman, that was an interesting study done by the School Boards Association. They entitled it an action plan and lead and achieve, and they went around the province and had a number of focus groups, and I guess from the department's perspective, what they found in their focus groups and what they wrote, or what was written in the report, was a pretty strong endorsement of the direction that the department was going. For example, they supported the renewed focus, the renewed emphasis on educational accountability and for the delivery of educational programs in the province. In other words, they were supporting basically the provincial testing program. I assume that's what it was. They also talked about the need for smaller class sizes, particularly in the elementary grades, and as members know, the Learning for Life plan of the government does address that, and they were capped last year in primary, this year in grade 1, and next year in grade 2, and so on. I guess in general, what the School Boards Association determined in their consultations was very similar to what the department determined in its consultations with the public when they were preparing the Learning for Life document. They wanted smaller class sizes. They also wanted a new standard report card for all students, and I think the difficulties with report card is that parents, they want to know what it means when they get a report card. They want to be able to understand it. Standard for that, they asked for job fairs for teachers. They wanted to strengthen school advisory councils, and of course that has been done. And the other thing which they were concerned about was students who were, we talked about it in the House the other day, for whom perhaps in other years would have gone to a vocational school program. Good students, able to do things, learn things, just really weren't interested as much in sort of the academic high school as they were getting, in some ways, getting more direct preparation for the school leaving years.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Kings West.
Another area, I guess, that I've had a few calls on since becoming a member of the legislature is with regard to special students between the ages of 18 and 21. We all know that the Education Act does spell out that students' education is the responsibility of the province up to the age of 21. And I know that there certainly seems to be a gap now if a student does finish school at 18 and certainly through those next 3 years, in other words, in the educational domain. There may be other community opportunities and so on for them, but I'm wondering if the department, again, is looking at some way of meeting that need. And I point out in particular students who have had perhaps technology that they've been able to use to assist their education, and once they leave school, that is then taken from them. And in fact, in the two cases that I reference here, and one may still come to the legislature, she's still hounding to get something done, and appropriately too, I must say. I'm just wondering, because in her case, she sees her daughter now slipping back from what the public school gave her for 12 years. And I'm just wondering if there is something that is being looked at by the department to fill that gap.
Thank you, member. The Minister of Education.
I'd have to see the specifics of the young person to whom the honourable member refers. The province has invested a fair bit in an adult high school in recent years, and of course there are literacy groups right around the province which were supported by the federal government and also had some support from the provincial government. If a person wishes to go on to post-secondary education and is acceptable, accepted in it, then there was a fair bit of help available to students, and I'll talk about the Learning Center at St. Mary's, which is perhaps the best known facility in the province at universities, and the community college. Community college also was very good if students go into those programs and need particular supports. Now, you mentioned this computer, I believe is what you mentioned, and certainly the under that program, if they move on to secondary education, technology is available if it is needed for them. And the other thing that has recently been established is a provincial transition committee, and it was established under this kayak group, which was the Children and Youth Action Committee, and recognized that there were students who were in that situation, and they're exploring options, and hopefully something will be forthcoming before too long. However, I would encourage the honourable member, you know, if a student completes school and then leaves school, then really the public school system, I guess, effectively has, you know, if you've completed your public schooling, then public schooling has done its job.
Thank you, Minister. Member for Kings West.
I'm just, I guess if the chair doesn't mind, I was wondering how much time is remaining.
You have, member, till 3:50, so you have another 5 minutes.
5 minutes, okay. I guess since I will be handing off after this hour to the member, of course, to the NDP first, and then to the member of Citadel, perhaps to do the final questioning on education. And I did want to make just a couple of comments on the provincial math exams, so that I did get on the record with these. I know the minister is looking at making perhaps a final statement to teachers, students in this regard. But I guess my concerns are that I felt that the rollout process here for this exam was not as strong as what we had seen with the other provincial exams, and I think that certainly was a factor in the low scores. Certainly, in fact, just on the weekend, talking with a math teacher from Central Kings, he was very quick to say that his top 5 to 10% of students did well, and who, of course, quickly gleaned the scope of the exam, the nature of the questions, and did fine. But for a vast majority, 1 hour more on that exam for his students would have made all the difference, because one of the things that he starts off his year with to get them into the practice is to read the question, think about it, when you finish, make sure you review. Students on that provincial exam did not have time to review. Also, of course, there were boards who came out and certainly said that there were some limitations on the amount of in-service that they were able to be provided. We know that each board does a certain number of days, and they didn't all get in some cases. I think that certainly needs to be considered. And the fact was, the reality that we had many different exams being written across the province in our schools. We had some schools that the students tackled every single question, and we had other schools where, of course, they were not required to do certain questions. The other thing, and I don't think I'm telling the minister anything new here. He possibly has heard this. I did, during this time, I did get a lot of emails, a lot of questions, being the education critic, from across the province. So I don't think I'm telling them anything new here, but I certainly had grade 12 math teachers and schools tell me that they pretty well took the situation into their own hands and would not see students who were applying for scholarships and entry be affected by the mark that they received, knowing, of course, that these would not even be reviewed by the province, of course, until summer, And therefore, they felt that there was some deficiencies in the exam, and therefore, of course, they went ahead and made a judgment call on their own. And I just want to, get that on the record. And in one final question, I would ask the minister that if he's in this position for some future months and years, we don't know, but if the next round of national testing scores are even lower than where we sit presently, would you be willing to take a look at having an educational summit to, in other words, address some of the difficulties that we do have in our education system across the province?
Thank you, member. Minister of Education.
I thank the honourable member for those comments and his observations, and some of them I have heard before. Now, he's mentioned the issue of an educational summit, and certainly it would be something that we're prepared to take under advisement, although in some ways you think of the school board's focus groups around the province as in some ways being a bit of a summit. The department's approach when they developed the document Learning for Life, again, broad consultation, very broad consultation as a bit of an educational summit. I think the department does have gathering of educational leaders, a lot of times usually teachers, and then people whom may be involved from the teacher training institutions or the community colleges or the liberal arts faculties and universities. We would certainly be prepared to look at something. I think it would have to be pretty carefully defined. When you talk about a summit, I'm not so sure that, what I wouldn't mind participating is in a Canadian educational summit where we can promote a little bit more standardization among the provinces in terms of public education.
Thank you, Minister, and the time has expired for the Liberal caucus. I'll now move to recognize the member for Timberley Prospect.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and it's nice to see you in the House. Nice to see you in the chair. I'm going to be sharing my time with the member from Cumberland South at an opportune time over the next few minutes. The member from Cumberland South has some issues to bring to the floor, and I think it's appropriate that in the spirit of sharing that we hear from that member. Now, I have a couple of points I'd like to bring to the minister's attention. I received a handwritten, no other way is to be delivered, right? A handwritten copy of who's on this math team. And I'd just like to bring this to the minister's attention. It was told in this handwritten note that the university professor from Acadia was included, that Martha Craig was involved in putting together the math test, the math consultant, although I don't know if we had those things anymore, Rick McKinnon was involved, and 11 other math teachers. And I would like to have the minister, if it's possible, to provide for me the name of those 11 other math teachers that put together the grade 12 math test at your convenience with no rush. I'd like to talk about the code of conduct. I'm firmly of the belief, Mr. Minister, that the number one thing that is missing in many schools today, particularly at the junior high, middle school, high school level of education, is discipline. I'm concerned about the fact that school principals feel powerless, if I can use that term. They certainly at times feel that they are not in charge. And I've heard and I've seen previous ministers speak about the code of conduct. I've heard and read some of the expectations, but taking those words off paper and putting them into effect are two very different things. For example, I believe that there should be a dress code in schools. A dress code that is firmly and fairly applied. And that dress code would be a reflection on parents, stakeholders groups, input from various members of the community. But I can tell you that having had the opportunity to visit many schools, not just the schools in my constituency, but other schools, I'm concerned about the fact that teachers, principals feel powerless in what's happening in our schools. And I know that there's members opposite who can reminisce, as I do on occasion, about the good old days in education. And I'm not saying that we have to bring back straps and that we have to have them in school uniforms. But I can tell you that we have a problem in schools across this province when it comes to discipline. And that there are schools across this province that are in chaos because the teachers are not in charge. So I'd like you to, if you could please, comment on those few topics. And I've heard you mention before the code of conduct and how important it is, but where are we with taking those words off the paper and putting them into action?
Thank you, Member. The Honourable Minister of Education.
Very interesting issue raised by a member from Timberley Prospect, and I think I agree with a good deal of what he had to say. I don't think, as he has indicated, we can go back to the days of school uniforms in public schools, although we have some very successful schools in this province who do have very rigorous requirements. And the issue of uniforms is, other jurisdictions expect it varies, and of course in some other countries uniforms are required. But the issue of dress codes and what is appropriate apparel is a very difficult one, and I think individual school administrators probably set different standards around the province. I know one of the things that I'm often my wife and I do talk about when we see some of the costumes that you see young people wearing on the street. And they anyway, the standards have changed, I guess, and they are different from what I was used to. And to be candid, I don't know if I have difficulty at how you describe it, but despite how young people dress today, most of them are very decent and respectful young people, and that's the good thing. The issue of discipline in an individual school, and it's that kind of that aura when you get into a school. And I guess I referred to thinking it now at the high school level, and some schools have a very rigorous standard, and it's and they adhered to it, and it's very, very difficult. But you have to remember as well, when you're building a school culture, it does take some time to do that. And unfortunately, at the beginning of the standard setting, or whatever you wish to call it, you get a lot more transgressions, and thus it seems more severe until you get into when it becomes an established part of the school culture. And sometimes I think we have to be patient. On the other hand, I agree with the honourable member. It's when you go into enough schools, you kind of get that feel. And there are schools that I guess I've been in where you just get that real warm feeling when you walk in, and there are some other schools where you've gone in and you didn't get the real warm feeling. And there are enough people who have done that would understand the difference. And I don't know exactly how to define it, but I guess the running of the school is the job of the administration. But the other thing that we have is now in place, which may help the administration do their job a little bit easier are these school advisory councils. And for example, school advisory councils are in a position to dictate dress codes if they so felt. I mean, there are certain things like wearing your hat in a classroom, and you know, some schools you can wear a hat in a classroom, some schools you can't. I happen to think you shouldn't be in a classroom with your hat on. But you know, I know that that is occasionally maybe deemed to be in the past.
Thank you very much, Minister. The honourable member for Timberley Prospect.
Well, that lack of consistency concerns me because I can tell you in the years that I was there, and my young friend from Sackville-Cobequid can tell you, when I first went to Sackville High School, and I know why I was sent there, and I know the job that was put in front of me. I used to deal with students in a rather direct manner, and they used to tell me, my father has a lawyer. Or if you do that to me, I'll call the Bedford Sackville Daily News. And it was a contest in Sackville at the time, right? Who was going to be on the front page of the BS, excuse the terminology, but we used to call it the BS News. Who was going to be in the front page of the Bedford Sackville Daily News more this week? The vice principal at the high school, or the cat that was caught on the roof, or the dog that had been running away and run over by a fire truck, whatever. And I want to tell you, that lack of consistency